Hey everybody, this is Danny Echevarria with theproaudiofiles.com. I'm going to be taking a look at how to clean up electric guitar resonances in this video. I'm going to look at some of the most common problem areas you can look to find issues with electric guitar, and I'm going to be looking at why it can really make a big difference to take care of these sorts of problems early in your signal chain, especially after you start adding other types of processing. Before I start getting into that, let's just take a listen to the song we're going to be working with. This is a beat by my very good friend Greg Johnson of the duo Nail Polish. Check it out. So this beat is sort of built around this electric guitar loop, but I really lose a lot of the notes of the part. And a big part of what's going on is that there's this upper mid-range resonance here that is sort of masking the clarity of some of the notes. It's this sort of chimey, almost whistly sound, and I'm gonna solo the electric guitar for a minute so that we can kind of hunt down the problem area and figure out what to do with it. So I'm just gonna throw on good old Fab Filter Pro Q. I'm gonna sweep around with a narrow band and try to find the offender, and then we'll make a narrow cut there. Okay, seems like that was it. A little bit below 1700 hertz. So I'm gonna make a narrow cut here, maybe about 6 dB. And unfortunately, this is probably not going to completely remove this resonance, but this frequency range is pretty important for electric guitar, and you'll hear, especially in the mix, we're going to lose some important stuff if I cut this too deeply. And I'm also going to use this auto gain compensate so we get back volume for what we're losing cutting this out. So here's a quick before and after. I will bypass this whole EQ and then bring it back in, and you can hear what this narrow cut is doing. Okay, so it's much more under control. What I'm noticing, though, as I listen back with this reduced upper mid-range content of this guitar, is that it's starting to feel a little bit woolly and muddy in the lower mid-range. So I'm going to take care of that too. I'm going to give a high-pass filter, which is not so much about these resonances, but just kind of a good idea. And then I'm going to the place that I'm hearing this sort of woolly resonance is in the lower mid range. So I'm gonna drop a bell here around just a little over 200 hertz. And again, this is not an area I can afford to cut too deeply or to lose too much from, because it does have some important stuff for the electric guitar here. So I'm going to use a dynamic cut of 2 dB. And by the way, if you're not familiar with dynamic EQ, I just wrote an article. It's up on the Pro Audiophiles website explaining what it's about and why it's a useful tool to have in your kit. I really rely on it a lot. I think it's a great thing to have available. So basically, this is just going to be a cut of up to 2 dB when this frequency range is a problem. And unlike with this upper mid-range frequency cut that I did before, this is less about one specific note that I hear ringing out and more of sort of a generalized buildup. It's a resonance in that sense in this lower mid-range. So that's why it's a broad cut rather than a narrow one. And maybe I'll make it a little narrower. And it's a dynamic cut because, again, I want to tame the mud, but I don't want to thin things out too much. Let's get back into the mix and hear what this guitar sounds like now. I'm gonna A/B again. I'll start with this muted, and then I'll bring it back in. Okay, so I like what this is doing already. I'm hearing this sort of greater sense of balance across the frequency spectrum, including those lower notes. And I want to really quickly also address what would happen if I cut this resonant frequency more deeply. Because, like I said, I don't really want to lose too much here, but I want to show you what it's like if you do. So I'm going to cut just a crazy amount. 30 dB. Well, let's go all the way and hear what that sounds like. So, in addition to the guitar sounding sort of hollow, it kind of disappears from the mix because we're losing some pretty important presence frequencies here. So, not into that. Bringing it back, sticking with -6. Now I want to take a look at some other processing that I might do. And as I add this other processing, I think it's going to start to become clearer and clearer why it is important to have these EQ cuts to clean up resonances like this. So I'll start with some EQ. I love the LA3A for electric guitars, acoustic guitars too. I'm using UAD's version, but the Wave CLA3A is another great one, and there's definitely others out there, so worth picking up some version of this compressor if you've got it. I'm going to dial in like up to 2 dB of gain reduction and not a hair more. Let's see how that goes. Okay. I like what this is doing. It's increasing that sense of clarity across the frequency spectrum. Because again, I feel like I was losing some of the articulation on some of that lower stuff. And if I were to not have those EQ cuts, then I would be potentially compressing that resonance. I would be maybe even bringing forward the resonance, making it have more sustain, which is the opposite of what I want because I really hear that ringing frequency sort of masking the other notes in this part. And this effect is going to continue to get more intense as I add more plugins. So I'm going to go for some saturation now. Technically really some compression too via tape emulation. This is Waves J37. I've been loving this just to like use it like a caveman. And you're about to see what I mean by that. I'm just going to crank the input gain until I see the metering sort of flirting with the red, but not going there. And, just listening for sort of an overall enhancement, in sort of presence and clarity in this guitar part as I do. So check it out. Okay, so that sense of balance across the frequency spectrum is just improving as I add more stuff to this chain. I'm really into it. And I want to illustrate now what would happen if I were making these processing choices without having dealt with those resonances first. So I'm going to take this EQ out and let's listen to what the rest of my chain is doing without it. And then I'm going to bring it back in and you can sort of hear how these plugins without this EQ, without these cuts, are going to be sort of enhancing these resonances that I want to get rid of. Once I take care of them, then instead my compressor and my tape emulation are going to be enhancing everything else, the stuff that I do like. So listen for that. So I really like what this whole chain is doing. And with the resonance, especially the upper mid-range resonance taken care of like this, I could even add other EQ to this chain to make it brighter, sort of after all of this. I love this Kush Clariphonic, just high-end EQ. It's really just kind of hard to screw up. Adds brilliance and presence to things. So I'm going to do some boosting here, like around the same frequency that I just was cutting. And this is going to add some sparkle and some presence. And hopefully that resonance is not going to be out of hand because we took care of it. Let's see. I'm into it. Let's hear again. I'm going to take out that first EQ and A/B what it sounds like without, and then with this resonance control. So we're getting that extra brightness and we're getting that extra presence, but it's not amplifying that problem that we originally had. So one last time, I'm just going to take this whole chain out. We'll do from dry to processed AB. And I want you to notice also, if you watch the meter for the channel on the left side, you're going to see a little bit of movement in terms of the overall level on this channel with and without these plugins in. But overall, the amount of presence and sort of perceived volume that I'm hearing does not match what I'm seeing on this meter in terms of actual increase in the gain that we're seeing. So check it out. So I'm really hearing this much greater sort of sense of balance across the whole spectrum. I'm hearing those lower notes with a lot more clarity, and it's got this brilliance, and it doesn't feel like it's being overpowered by that sort of chimey ring out. So I'm into it. If you have any favorite techniques for taking care of guitar resonances, let me know in the comments. Let's keep talking about it. But until next time, I am Danny Echevarria, theproaudiofiles.com. You can find me at dandestiny.com. Until next time, happy mixing, everybody. Peace.